Hey everybody, thanks for joining. We're still going to give folks a few more minutes. People are still logging into WebEx, so just give folks a few more minutes here before we get started. Thanks. Hi everybody, we're still waiting for folks to join, so we're going to get started in a minute or so here. Just hang tight and we'll kick things off very shortly. Thanks. All right, let's get started. I want to welcome everybody that is joining the webinar today. Today's topic is adapting to digital change: how to differentiate, extend reach, and establish trust in financial services. My name is Tyson Witten. I'm the Director of Solutions Marketing for CA API Management, and I am happy to be joined by my colleague, David Bresler. David is the Vice President of Financial Services Solutions at CA Technologies, and hopefully we have an interesting topic for everybody today. And so just to set the stage, let me move the slide here. I think as everybody can attest just through their daily lives and just walking out your front doors, that the world is changing and how we're interacting with different businesses. Essentially every business that wants to win and stay in the game today, that wants to stay competitive, is now becoming a digital business. So really, for any business that wants to keep that competitive edge, they have to invest in software. There's really just there's no questions about that. So it really doesn't matter, what industry you're in, whether you're in finance, you're in retail, whether you're in manufacturing, or if you were primarily brick and mortar 5 years ago. In order to win, in order to keep your customers, in order to open up new opportunities, you have to take advantage of the major trends of our time. And so social, cloud, mobile apps, the Internet of Things, those are all the major trends, digital trends that have to be taken advantage of. And so as the slide says in front of you, essentially what's happening is businesses being rewritten by software. So today, to kick things off, I'm going to have David start. He's going to walk through And using financial institutions as an example, I mean, I think a lot of these use cases and dialogue can be, I would say, relevant to other industries as well. But what he's going to do, he's going to walk through how organizations can make that transition from the old to the new, discussing some specific opportunities. So we'll go through some, specific opportunities as it relates to loyalty programs, loan origination, and insurance, and then kind of hit on how APIs, application programming interfaces, provides the right platform to meet those goals. What he's also going to discuss is a dilemma. It's what a lot of us have to deal with on a daily basis, and that's how to maintain a good user experience and provide that good user experience while also having to secure sensitive information, especially when we're talking about financial services. There's a lot of financial or sensitive information that's being shared, and that is a dilemma. How do you protect the business but then enable it and provide a great user experience and drive business forward as well? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit on some ways in which API management can help you achieve those goals. We've done some case studies that we have at CA, and I'm going to wrap up, and then we'll go into Q&A. So hopefully people can stay on at the end. And then tomorrow what we're going to do is we're going to send out a recap and some relevant assets that we have that are pertinent to the topic. So to kick things off, I'm going to hand it over to David. David?
All right. So, let me introduce myself briefly. Tyson introduced my title. Obviously, I'm an employee here at CA and have been for about a year. I've spent about 12 years in the SO and API space. I've spent my whole career working in delivering technology to financial services. And here at CA, by the way, about 40% of our business is with financial services, and we categorize financial services as banking, capital markets, and insurance. So we include insurance in that. I spend a lot of time thinking and talking to people about how technology can be used. And if you walk away with one thing today, it's that mobile is really different in how it's setting people's expectations. I think there's a lot of different reasons and a lot of things that are coming together for that. But I hope by the end of the presentation you'll have a sense for what I mean by that. And let me start with some examples. And by the way, the genesis of this presentation was very interesting. Somebody made an offhand comment to me and said, we're a bank, we're never going to have an external API, get over it, stop talking to me about it. And I wasn't prepared to really answer that because I was already a few steps ahead and said, of course, everybody has an API strategy. And so today's presentation, I'm going to help you understand why banks need an API. What's really, at least to me, interesting about what can be done with an API and what some of the challenges are. And Tyson shared some of the use cases that I'll use. I have a business case in here. We have some really good, I hope, conversational stuff. But starting, though, with this picture, and this is a picture of an Old West, American West bank branch. And frankly, not a whole lot except maybe some paneling and floor tiling has changed. There are computers on desks, but the basic flow of the bank branch itself hasn't really changed much. And we've applied technology to banking and of course to insurance and capital markets. But let me share 3 examples of how technology has been used and what I think some of the challenges of that are. And so, today you can get your bill in the U.S. mail, of course, your statement, rather, or you can go online and get an online version of your statement. And the banks rolled that out in part as a cost-saving convenience measure. Of course, the statement itself hasn't fundamentally changed. But what we'll see is, or what we've seen is that the adoption of online statements has really stalled. And of course, banks' response to that is, well, let's tell people we have online statements so that, they're not adopting them, well, let's then tell them louder or use different language. But there's no ability to fundamentally shift how we're approaching trying to change customer behavior. You look at credit card fraud, and we've applied technology to reduce credit card fraud. Yet false positives work directly against marketing objectives in the way that if my card, and this happened to me, I went and I bought a couple of suits. Actually, it was right before my wedding. When I bought a couple of suits, and this has probably happened to you, right? The card is declined for fraud. It's you. It's your card. It's just that maybe you've not shopped at this store in a while, or it's too big a purchase, or whatever. And I asked myself, so what do I do? By the way, I pull out a different credit card, which is exactly what the credit card company doesn't want you to do. So here you have technology saying we're preventing fraud, but getting directly in the way of the business objective. And I ask myself, as a technology person, why can I get two-factor authentication when I log in, but there isn't a better way than switching credit cards to stop this false positive thing? And the third example, and this is a recent one, right, is photo check deposit, right? So the banks, and as it turns out, by the way, a little personal note, my wife is in credit card marketing in her profession. So I get good insight, and we have some interesting conversations at home, at least interesting for me. I can't speak for her. But I asked her, how come the banks are doing commercials for photo check deposit? Like, to me, this is like an obvious thing, and you're promoting a feature. What's the big deal? And the answer is that people that are not technical don't really know about this data the same way that you do. And the interesting thing is, and I don't know if you felt this, but everybody I point this out to kind of nods their head and relates. So if you're a technical person listening, I think you'll relate as well. The technical person in me loves photo check deposits, right? I get home at night, I go through my mail, I get a check in the mail, I pull out my phone, I deposit it, done. But the human in me, the person, is frustrated because as soon as I'm done with that, I have a paper check and I don't know what to do with it. And it sounds funny, but at home I have a stack of paper checks and I don't know what to do with it. And a technical person, the technical person in me would say, well, when the check is deposited, you'll get an email, you go online, you see which check it was, you take the check out, and you throw it out, and you know you're done. But the human in me, and when I talk to people, I know technology people who won't use this because they like the paper trail. They like going to the bank and getting the receipt and then putting the receipt in a folder. And so there's a change in human behavior that's required in order to get people over the hump. Now, as technology people, we're more likely to adopt this stuff. But you see the technology applied to electronic statements. The technology applied to fraud detection. They solve problems, but they actually worsen the user experience to some extent. And that's one of the things that's changing. And that's not something that, as an industry, technology, or specifically in finance, we've addressed. And I like talking about retail banking and credit cards and to some extent insurance, because I think we're all consumers of this kind of service, so we can all relate to the experience. And so the technology solves problems, but what we really want to do, and where things are going, if you will, with mobile and apps and the consumerization of technology, the availability of the cloud, these are driving the need to have more awareness of the experience that people have when they're using our products. And the things that are changing, and some of the examples that we'll look at, have a lot to do with new distribution channels for products. And I know banks focus a lot on multi-channel banking and bringing together all the different channels that they interact with their customers to get a better experience. But there are a lot more distribution channels, and I'm going to share some ideas that hopefully will open your mind up to even more possibilities than we think about today. The other thing is this user experience trend, not really a trend I think at this point, I think it's just the way things are. But the experience is not just about maybe minimizing clicks, but it's about insinuating or integrating with lifestyle and the flow. And let's start off with a very powerful example for that. But all the while, there's this increased focus on security, and I like the word trust because it's not only about security. Of course, it's also about privacy, which I bundle into security. Security people kind of roll their eyes when I do. But it's also this element of trust which feeds back into the user experience that it's going to work the way it's supposed to whenever it does. And that gives me trust in the brand and trust in the company and what they're delivering for me. So Tyson's going to talk a little bit later about how we have some technology that enables you to deliver a better user experience, frankly because it's easier to do some of the infrastructure stuff and it's easier to provide consistent security. Well, at the same time as improving the user experience, you can actually improve the security and improve the privacy and make your applications more compliant and have a faster go-to-market because all of that is embedded in the infrastructure. Those are really critical elements. So let's kind of think about these new distribution channels and creatively explore some of these use cases and what it means. And let's talk through a business case that really talks about the opportunity that we're faced with in financial services and frankly, even beyond financial services. So that's not the topic for today. So a couple of weeks ago, Uber launched their API, and it was a fun day, and I am definitely a phone mobile geek, if you will, because one of the things that I love to do, especially if I haven't had my phone in a few days, I'm traveling on vacation, the first app that I look at is the App Store. How many of my apps have updated, and what cool little things do I have? And so Uber announced their API, and all of a sudden, I had a huge number of apps that were updating, and all of these apps were now allowing me to use Uber from within their app, whether it's an airline app or an open table or whatever it is. And this is really interesting and extremely relevant because what they've done, instead of making you go to Uber to use their service and interact with their brand, when you're using United or you're using OpenTable or you're using some other app, you now have the opportunity to interact with the Uber brand. And back to that question where we're a bank, we're never going to have an open API. Well, you guys have points. Wouldn't it be interesting if in all of those apps, instead of getting an Uber, you could pay with rewards points? Imagine if you could pay with rewards points to use your Uber, and that was just a click away. And in fact, you might be able to do that today if you go to the bank website and click through and find out, but that's a different journey. That's a changed habit. Not many people remember to go to the website before they start changing. And so you're thinking about this, and it's like, imagine if you had an economy around rewards points. So wherever you were shopping, you could pay with rewards points. And so you're in a Best Buy and you can pay with your rewards points. You're interacting with the bank's brand. You're at a gas station, but you're interacting with the bank's brand. You no longer need to be at the bank's website or at the ATM or in the branch in order to experience the bank. You're having this fantastic user experience wherever you are, and that's what mobile enables. And you might say, Dave, that's a really big vision, but that's not part of our business plan and blah, 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 blah. And you might be right, but let's examine this because I think you might be mistaken if you felt that way. Because today, and I think this is a really cool example of integration, right? You can pay with points at Amazon. You link in your card, and this is a screenshot from my account. And up on the right, you'll see that I have $108 worth of points, and I can pay with them all or some or whatever right from the app. It's really easy to use. It tells me how many points I have. It's live, so it's up to date as far as I can tell, and frankly, it's just so easy to use that I'm compelled to use my points. Now, why does that matter? And from a business case perspective, you might say, well, if you do this at Amazon, so you're already doing this kind of integration today, and frankly, I don't know how the integration happens. I suspect it's traditional integration, and we'll get to that in a minute. But you're doing it today, so why wouldn't you want to do it anywhere else? Why wouldn't you want to do it with Etsy? Or why wouldn't you want to do it with some smaller e-commerce sites? And what is the business case for doing that? If you're doing it with Amazon and it's working, you've proved that you want to do it. So let's look at the business case a little bit. Loyalty points are a balance sheet item. So the faster you can take them off the balance sheet, the better it is for the bank. Loyalty points are also a major element in, well, loyalty to the brand. And the more you use them, the more interactions with the brand, you build up good brand equity. And as long as I have a good experience using those points, I don't know, I read this statistic where something like, for every negative thing you say to your wife, you have to say like 4 or 5 positive things because of the balance. The negative things kind of do more damage than the positive things do good. I don't know if that's exactly the ratio, but it would be the same thing with a brand. If I'm only calling your call center when I have a problem, and every time I experience you, half the times I experience you, I have a problem. The other half, I'm just kind of taking out money from the ATM or whatever it is. But if every time now I'm paying with points, and I'm like, oh yeah, this point program is great. I get to do this. Wow, I just got that thing for free. I got that thing for free. I'm building up a good reserve of customer positivity, and that's really good. And of course, if the points are more usable, they're more valuable. And I don't incorporate this later in the presentation, but I'll tell you that the market research shows that people who are qualified as prosumers, meaning that they know a lot of details about their credit card programs and they take full advantage of them, they have a much higher correlation to a good perception of the brand than regular people who just use 1 or 2 features. So the idea that you can make these points more accessible and more usable along the customer journey instead of changing a habit, it's really, really powerful business value. And you can imagine, as a technical person now, if we did something like this, what other things could we do that would benefit the bank? Well, studying customer data behavior by analyzing their patterns, we could change the currency ratio of points to actually get more points off for less dollars based on customer behavior. And you can gain that, and you can get better insight into customer behavior by doing that. And so again, that's not just a current benefit, but it's a future benefit. Now, the API enables this sort of business innovation because now you no longer need a heavyweight integration. So back to how I imagine the Amazon Chase integration would be, is you got a team on one side, a team on the other side, they're working together to figure out things like how we can connect, what's the security protocol, what's the message format, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And that's pretty heavyweight integration. Now, it's possible to do, but Amazon probably drives a lot of business, and it's very visible. Look, I'm talking about it in my webinar. So what you have here is a good, solid ROI model because Amazon is so large. But you have to change the model in order to be able to deliver that with somebody smaller, like Etsy, for example, where the turnover might not be so high. And if it takes 10 people on each side to do the integration traditionally, well, you're never going to get that ROI. So what you need to be able to do is simplify the integration. And I was talking to the marketing manager of the Mall of America, and non-technical person, pure marketing person. And she was like, I don't have the staff to build 10 apps for my mall. So what I'm going to do is write one API, and I'm going to delegate the complexity and let people write whatever apps they want. Now, that's not exactly the way that it works in the world of finance. But if Amazon is big and important, you could put some resources on that, and there's an ROI. But based on what you learn, you deliver a good point API with the right level of security. And again, security needs to be easy and governable and compliant and all of that. I'm not saying compromise security. I'm not saying compromise your privacy. But I'm saying with increased security, you open up that API, and all of a sudden, just like it's Uber anywhere, it's paid with points anywhere. And I'll tell you, there aren't going to be 10 Ubers in every United app, right? There's going to be one. So the company that does this first is the one that has the competitive differentiation. And by the way, right now it looks so obvious to get a taxi in any of these applications. So in retrospect, it's really important. And so the way to look at it, and the trend that we're seeing for mobile, is how do you unbundle these services and then distribute them through non-traditional channels in a way that drives value to the customer and it brings them a better experience with your brand. So Another example, and this is one of my favorites because it's so frustrating. And again, if you look closely at the right screenshot, it says David. This is an email that I got, and it's our corporate perks program here at CA. And on the left is another membership rewards program, and you may recognize it or not. I cut the logos out because it's not about talking bad about the companies that are doing it a traditional way, but there are so many benefits at work. There are many benefits as part of the credit cards that I have, but I never remember about them. I don't really know how to use them. And I forget that I could get a discount on shopping if I go, frankly, to either of these sites, because I have to be at my desk and I have to remember, oh yeah, I might stop at the store later, and so let me kind of go on here and see what's going on. No, I'm at the store. I walked by it, I left work 10 minutes early, so I have an extra 10 minutes, I'm going to go shopping. That's my journey. That's my experience. And so there's no reason why companies can't expose these programs through other channels, whereas today it's only through their existing web channel, for example, that you can access these programs. And the interesting thing, if any of you do business in China, you look at some of what's happening here in the U.S. in mobile, and I suspect in Europe, and you go to, again, let's pick on OpenTable or Uber, and you go to these apps, and within the app is a map app that gives you the location of the car or the location of the restaurants. In China, for whatever reason, the messaging apps are doing it differently. They have a map, and within that map, you can see 3 different types of taxi that you might get and where the cars are, or 4 different types of restaurant and where the restaurants are, and filter it that way. So, in the U.S., you go to the service and then you find the location, whereas in China, you go to the location and then you pick from the service that you want. So all I'm saying here is that mobile enables you to have the flexibility to do whatever's appropriate for the customer. These portals where you can get corporate perks or use your points are great, and that traditionally they're valuable. That's why they were done. But presumably, if you're making the effort, like with Amazon, you're making the effort to pay with points, wouldn't you want to pay with points everywhere? And if you do, then what's the ROI? And the ROI is too high. APIs allow you to drive that ROI down, which opens up the business case for much more explosive growth and other side values. Now, when it comes to mobile and the user experience, reducing friction is really important. And it kills me when I go to fill out a form and the company asking me to fill out a form already has all the information. So from a business banking perspective, banks have relationships with CA. CA has all sorts of information, my payroll information, my current location, they probably have my social security number, and so on and so forth. They must have my social security number, right? So wouldn't it be great if there were a corporate service that gave me small loans? And CA has all that information. So in theory, I should just need to push a button to get access to that loan. Now, I'm going to jump over to the next slide without switching to it. Let me give you an example, and it's slightly different. But, again, Gadget Geek, iPhones, Apple Store, Barclays has a relationship with Apple that allows you 0% financing if you pay the bill and all of that. And you fill out a form, just like you're applying for a credit card. The form has all sorts of information. Nobody on mobile is going to fill out that form. But you know what? I'm a Barclays customer. And so Barclays actually has all of that information. So is there a way to eliminate friction, maintain the compliance for their credit risk management, and maintain the compliance of privacy, yet slipstream that so that anybody buying something at the Apple Store will use Barclays to finance it? Because if they're doing it, it must be valuable. They want to make it more accessible. And all right, so I will switch to the next one. But then if they're doing that today, with a little bit of shift in thinking, wouldn't it be interesting to do microloans? And I know today it's built on the credit card infrastructure, so it could be built on the credit card infrastructure. Maybe it doesn't have to be, but wouldn't it be interesting if I was going to buy, I don't know, something big at Home Depot, or I was going to treat myself, my family to a big meal at a restaurant. I don't know if that's something that you could do. And I go to pay with my phone, and there's an option that says, you know, finance through Chase or Barclays. And I finance it right on the spot because they have all this information about it and they know. And you might say, well, David, why don't you just use your credit card? And I don't know. When it comes to insurance, let's use insurance as an example, because I love this example. And I was talking to the CEO of a big insurance company the other day, and he loved this example, especially as you think about emerging markets. In the U.S., we get insurance. Personally, I'm overinsured. I have apartment insurance, I have everything insurance, and I like the safety. But what if, you know, today, for example, I had to get apartment insurance so that I can insure my wife's engagement ring. But what if I just wanted to insure the engagement ring? There's no way to do that. But could an insurance company unbundle the service and then offer somehow an in-app purchase kind of thing, so that when you're shopping for engagement rings, you literally take a picture of the engagement ring, take a picture of the receipt, and before you walk out of the store, you have insurance on that? I don't know. So you're unbundling insurance. I don't need apartment insurance. I'm just insuring this one thing. What if you're in an emerging market in Africa where business is not consistent like it is here in the U.S.? In the U.S., if I have a retail shop, I probably have a relatively steady state of inventory, and so I insure my inventory. But maybe in Africa, I get a shipment at the beginning of the month, and I don't get a shipment for 2 months. I sell it out after the first 2 weeks. So what I really want to do is insure that shipment. I don't need year-long inventory insurance. I want to insure this shipment. Can I do that? How do you unbundle that? Really, I think, interesting questions. Today, you can buy flight insurance when you buy airline tickets. Can I buy train insurance? Do I need to? I don't know. Would you like to? Do you buy the flight insurance? I don't, because I believe the complexity of that with the airline leaves me in a situation where I actually don't trust that it'll be valuable. But what if the underwriter tied into the statistics about lost baggage, and they focused just the same way? By the way, Apple Care is very profitable for Apple, and this is what Apple does. They upsell you on insurance. They cover 2 accidental damages to your device, and they give you an extra, period of time on which you're supported. So it's very clear messaging. What if I would buy insurance if the airline or somebody let me insure my bags? Because I got to tell you, the airline covers $250, which barely covers the cost of the bags, let alone the time and replacement value for the stuff in transition. So if I put a $500 suit or 2 suits for a week-long business trip, the $250 frankly doesn't get me anywhere. But I would happily insure that on an upsell if I could. So this is how mobile is changing the unbundling, and I'm kind of running with this, but there's so many opportunities to innovate and sell through different channels that are enabled by these trends in mobile. But the important thing is to keep in mind that this is not your old business IT way of delivering things. I really believe that bring your own device is really an element of bring your own expectation. People are so frustrated with enterprise technology and the way that enterprise technology is done. And now there's a different example. We see that example in our mobile phones every day. Consumer technology shows us that it can be a good experience. And we want that experience at work as employees. We also want that experience when we do business with our banks. And just because I'm that kind of guy, I tweeted at a bunch of different banks asking them when they will support Touch ID, and not one of them has given me a solid answer. Why is it taking so long to adopt these innovative technologies, in this case that improve security? Why can't I do that? Back to my example earlier, people who like the paper trail, why can't a bank deliver an application called Paper Trail that's meant to exactly mimic the paper trail to remove the barrier? So instead of just telling people louder that you have online statements, now adapt your online experience to their behavior so that the transition to digital is smoother. That's what user experience is. It's not just about where's the button on the screen, right? Now, I started by talking about the current state of finance, presenting some examples of how to use kind of this modern thinking to improve the user experience and be innovative with APIs and technology. Let me leave you with one last one. And if you saw yesterday's blog post that I wrote, little bit tongue-in-cheek, everybody's okay, but my wife was hit by a taxi as she was crossing the street here in New York. And the EMT said something very interesting. The emergency medical guy, the ambulance guy, said, and I don't believe this exact statistic, but you know, if it's in the range, it's interesting. 99% of vehicle pedestrian incidents involve taxis. Now, wow, that's really interesting, right? Because if the mayor wants to lower the speed limit, is that really going to impact bad taxi drivers as much, right? And in my case, the driver ran a stop sign and made a turn right into my wife. Now, Uber tracks taxi locations. What if Uber could enforce stop signs? And I don't mean stop the car, but what I mean is they have a database, and I'm speaking loosely, they know where all the stop signs are, they know driver behavior. If the driver doesn't stop at a stop sign, they get a fine. They get maybe a warning, then a fine, then they get a bad rating, then they're dropped. Or they get paid less, or something. But what if Uber did that, they could turn around and go to the communities that are trying to push them out because it's unfair against taxis and say, look, your taxi is going to run stop signs, and your taxi company doesn't know the quality of drivers that they have. We make sure our drivers don't run stop signs. And by the way, running stop signs are responsible for, I don't know the number, I'm making it up, 30%, 80% of pedestrian vehicle incidents, and therefore we're keeping your street safer. And then they go to the insurance companies and say, hey, you know what, don't insure us for stop sign violations. We're going to self-insure that. Give us an insurance policy for everything but stop sign violations and lower our insurance costs. And by the way, if you think that's crazy, that is exactly what Apple has done with fraud management. Some of this is rumor because I don't have any inside information, but Apple has launched Apple Pay, and unlike Google, again, rumors, I'm working only off what I read in the trade rags, Apple is getting a portion of the transaction, very small portion, and taking on some of the fraud responsibility. And Apple is using some of the latest tokenization. They're using their Touch ID in order to manage fraud themselves. So they're squeezing cash out of the system because they've taken an aggressive, innovative approach to some of this technology. So how can you do that in your business? I think that's what you need to ask yourself, because the challenge is, if you hold on too tight and say IT needs to do everything, and we need to own the whole website, and the website gets ported to the app, and that's the only way we think about technology, I think you're missing an opportunity. You know, nobody says, if your app doesn't work, nobody says, wow, what a great bank, but a lousy bunch of developers. If your app doesn't work, they say, I hate this bank, their app stinks. Right? That's the world that we're going into. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Tyson, who can help you deliver a better experience while improving security using Layer 7, the mobile access gateway, and some of this fantastic technology we've got embedded in that platform. So thank you, and Tyson, I believe you are now presenter.
Excellent. Thanks, David. That was great. I think David gave us a lot to think about. I think there's a lot of opportunities out there, scenarios, and he was really painting, I think, a picture of how we can monetize and take advantage of some of the technology at our fingertips. And so that's why I wanted to go into a little bit around the how, right? And so I think some of the things that I was picking up on that David was talking about in some of the kind of specific examples he was bringing up, related to organizations that want to do more with less. They want to become more agile, right? But what do they want to focus on? And it really comes back down to data. I think the organizations that have the power, they have the data. If you have the data, you have the power. And so, how are organizations able to monetize that information? How are they able to kind of monetize that through more agile practices? And it comes down to the API. The API is really becoming that fundamental hub. It's that connectivity point to take advantage of all those opportunities that David was talking about, whether it be connecting with partners, whether it be connecting with developers. It could be external developers or internal developers, mobile apps. Any mobile app that has to connect back to the enterprise is connecting back through an API. Any cloud service, right, that's being connected to is connecting through an API. If you look at the Internet of Things or smart technologies, whether it be really anything that has an app that collects or processes information, whether it be a vehicle, whether it be a television set, whether it be a watch or what have you, that is a vehicle. It's a platform to collect and process information, and that is going through an API. And so the API really is providing that opportunity for us to become more agile, more innovative, and then take advantage of all those things that David was talking about in terms of providing better experience and engagement to your consumers, but also opening up new distribution channels. Now, if I bring this down to exactly how you can do this, right, in terms of kind of the best way to, I would say, take advantage of APIs within your organization, there's a couple different things to think about, and I always like this diagram because I think it paints the right picture. And if we start at the bottom, it starts with runtime, right? So any app that you have and it's connecting back to information through an API, what we provide at CA is the ability to externalize information. So it could be existing types of services or data. You could have SOAP services or what have you. And what we're able to do is externalize that information through different adaptation types of methods to more modern and RESTful APIs so that those apps can connect to those existing services so that you can take advantage of the existing investment that you have within your organization. But not just the information that's internal to your enterprise, but it could be information that's outside as well. So different partner types of data sets as well. A good example is always Google Maps. So how is that information presented through different applications, right? So typically that would be through an API. So the ability to orchestrate all that information together and then provide an engaging experience through that application. And that's all done through our CA API gateway or mobile API gateway. The next thing to think about is a developer. The developer is a major constituent in the new application economy. And so providing them the right tools and access and understanding of these APIs is critically important. And so an API developer portal is the next thing that you have to think about to properly manage your APIs. And that's when we start thinking about the design time. So if you're a line of business and say you're responsible for the things that David was talking about, it could be your loyalty programs, it could be loan origination, you're looking at ways in which you can get that information out through new channels, right? And those new channels are going to have developers. And so you want to be able to enable those developers and provide them a simple way that they can understand what APIs that they have access to, how to engage those APIs or gain access to those APIs, and then providing them the right tools to develop the apps that are then going to connect back to those APIs. And so that is the design time portion of this diagram. And you can start to see it start to go in a loop there in which we start to develop those apps, and those apps are now connecting back through the gateway to the back-end data sets. The next thing I'd like to discuss is kind of focusing more on that developer, the developer constituent, if you will. And so the way that we like to think about this is that a lot of organizations that start to take advantage of APIs is that they manage APIs like products, and if they're doing it the right way, they're managing APIs like products, and they're managing their developers like customers. And so at the end of the day, really what we're looking at here is a way to become more scalable, right? And so there's a decoupling benefit that happens. You're decoupling the information that you're exposing from the application, and that's resulting in scalability benefits. You're able to have multiple APIs that can then connect out to a number of different applications. And so that provides scale, it provides opportunity, it provides reach out to different marketplaces. And that's exactly the point that David was making in terms of trying to extend your loyalty point programs out to different marketplaces. The other thing to think about is the experience. And so if we're focusing on the developer on the right-hand side there, so managing developers like customers, you want to provide them an easy way to be onboarded, to register, to test the applications that they have securely, and then providing them the right support and collaboration as well. And so at the end of the day, that's going to result in a better experience, right? So you're going to develop an API that's easy to use, that allows developers to get the information they want to provide an optimal experience through their application, and then you're going to provide them the right support so that they can focus on business logic and what's important within that app as well, which at the end of the day is going to provide a better experience to your customers. One of the last things I want to talk about here, just from a technology perspective, is the security element of things. And so if we're talking about financial services, obviously the information that we have to deal with is very sensitive. And so just enabling developers and providing a good user experience isn't good enough, as we know. And so we have to provide a solution that is secure. And the best way to do that is really end-to-end. And so the way that we do this is, yes, we provide security around the API as we expose and externalize service out into the outside the enterprise. But we also have to think about this in terms of securing the mobile app itself and then tying that back to the APIs. And so if we think about it that way, what we do is we offer an SDK that can be embedded directly within the mobile app that can provide authentication and access to that app, but then instrument access back to those APIs. So provide additional context based on the user, the app, and the device, and then apply that to fine-grained policies so that you can create policies that take all those different attributes into account and then determine access based on the scenario. Here's some examples, and so a lot of this has to do with also providing the convenience that's necessary not to inhibit adoption. So it has to be that right level. It has to be that right balance. You want to be able to provide security end-to-end, but you can't inhibit process. You can't take away from that user experience. So one specific example of that, from a technology perspective, is single sign-on. You're going to have multiple apps that you're delivering out to your employees or to your consumers, and you want to be able to provide a secure yet convenient experience. And so you want to make sure that you're providing single sign-on across those different applications. Now, the other thing that David hit on too is reducing friction, if you will. So one way to reduce friction is reducing the issues and the frustration that users have when they have to register for the first time when they're accessing your site, right, or your app. One way to do that is through social login, so taking advantage of the identity through different social networks to reduce that application process that sometimes a lot of us, just decide not to fill out in the first place, and then we move on someplace else. So ties to different social identities is another way, and that's something that's built into the SDK as well. So if you start to think about this, there's some convenience that has to be built into security, so it can't be separated. The last thing I want to hit on here is the ability to kind of provide additional functionality like geolocation access. And David brought up, I think, a great example just in terms of the ability to deposit checks from your phone. But security obviously has to be taken into account, and so maybe you want to apply some type of GPS or location attribute to that process. The only way that you're going to allow somebody to deposit that check is by ensuring they're within a certain mileage from their home, right? And then if they're not, maybe requiring them to enter in some additional credentials, if you will, to authenticate again, some type of step-up authentication. Just other types of things to think about that provide the right level of security that's convenient but also instills trust, right? You know that the right level of security is there. It makes you feel more comfortable as a consumer that your information is secure. So as we move on here, just a couple of points I wanted to make as it relates to the mobile use cases. We are coming out with a new release in our mobile API gateway next week, and so it's really the next step. It's the progression of features and capabilities that we're adding on to our SDK. And so, if you think about the single sign-on use cases that I brought up and providing a convenient experience across different apps, only requiring your user to log in once, but providing access to multiple apps, What we're also providing in this release is the ability to develop an application that organizes apps very simply. It's a place where your users can go to organize their apps, but then gain access to a number of apps in one place. And that's example on the right-hand side in which our internal IT department rolled that out. The other thing that we wanted to bring up is the idea of device single sign-on. And so if you think about this, again, this is just the evolution of app single sign-on, but then applying it to the device. And so, even at my desk right now, I have multiple devices that I'm working with, and it's really the multi-device universe. I have my laptop, I have my tablet, I have my my smartphone, and so why wouldn't we want to make that a more convenient user experience as people move between devices? So not just requiring them to log in once between apps, but say for instance I am logging into my banking application from my laptop. I decide I want to go into the kitchen, and I have my smartphone with me. Why not allow that transition to be very seamless through proximity-based access? Only don't require that person to log in again, but still provide the same level of security as that individual moves from device to device. So again, it's all about that balance. It's providing, again, the right level of security, so you're securing the information, but enabling the business process to continue. And you don't want to inhibit that, which provides, which provides friction and then reduces adoption of your app. The last thing I want to hit on here is our Samsung Knox integration that we have. And so you potentially could have some employees that are out in the field, they're using Samsung devices, and really what this is our integration with Samsung Knox and their mobile app and device security technology, in which together we provide single sign-on, but not just single sign-on, end-to-end security like I was talking about before. So tying in the device, app, and the user to the back-end API, so it's a true end-to-end mobile security. The last thing I wanted to hit on here as it relates to the technology is that you want to be flexible. You want to be able to provide an API management solution that meets the needs of that business in their business model. And so there have to be options in which deployment models can be chosen, different deployment models. And so, for instance, maybe you don't want to deploy the technology on-premise. And so you want to make sure that the solution that you select provides SaaS capabilities. You also want to make sure that there's some type of hybrid option as well. So for instance, maybe you have high volume transactions, especially in the financial industry. You want to make sure that your gateways and API gateways are close to the source of information, but then having the portal up in the cloud to provide your developers with easy access without having to deploy that on-premise, that might make sense for your business model. Or maybe you just want everything on site. So the point here is really just flexible deployment options depending on what your business is. So I'm just going to go, we have a few different case studies that I wanted to hit on. I'm just going to go through one. The others will be in the deck when we send that out tomorrow, just based on time right now. But I thought this was a really, even though this is a different industry, it's not financial services, it's related to finance and it's related to payments. And I think it really hits on the opportunities that David was hitting on early on. And so this is Orlando Utilities Commission. They serve different citizens in the Orlando area, with their utility business. One of the issues that they had was it was taking a long time to get payments through their different payment partners from the citizens in which they provided utility services to. And essentially what happened is that their payment partners would provide a batch process. So say, for instance, somebody wanted to make a payment, that would then sit with, that would sit in the system for about 24, 48 hours, and eventually the batch process would then send that to OUC, and then they would then, process that payment, and then say, for instance, with an existing customer, they would then turn their power back on, or for new customers, they'd then turn their power on. I think there's a couple different things that's interesting here. I think one, OUC understood that they wanted to open up new channels just outside their website, so they wanted to provide an easier experience for their customers to make payments, so through different trusted payment partners or through prepaid partner metering. But they saw the opportunity with APIs. They saw that, that just by opening up data to these different partners, it provided their partners with easy access to information so that they could then easily develop apps that provide a good user experience to those consumers. And so, after deploying their API model, I think they really reduced things down. I think it was in the 24-hour day period down to about 6 or 10 minutes to process a payment. So there was some significant return on investment as it related to this case study. There's some others in here. Take a look at them tomorrow. So some retail banking in terms of trading, some mobile app use cases that we have as well. So have a look at these case studies just in terms of how we're enabling financial services with our API management technology. But I do want to make some time for questions as well. And so just as a quick takeaway, here's where I leave you. I think as you're looking at an API management solution, as you're thinking about new ways to go to market, open up your data through new distribution channels or providing a better experience through mobile apps, there's a few different things you have to think about. First thing is you have to focus on the developer. It's the new application economy. The developer is a critical part of the app economy, and so you want to make sure that you're providing them the right tools so that they can develop a great user experience for your consumers to drive adoption of the app. The other thing is integrate everything. So, one thing I like to say is that as you develop new apps, old apps don't die, and so you need a way to integrate with those existing data sets within your organization or outside your organization. And so any technology you select has to have some type of adaptation or orchestration capability so that you can translate existing services into more modern services, especially for mobile apps. The other thing is you're now an open enterprise. You're starting to expose this information. Security is very important. You want to make sure that you're protecting your APIs from threats, but also providing the right access to your APIs based on the user, the app, or the machine that's connecting to those APIs. And then finally, monetization. There's different ways that you can monetize APIs. There's direct API monetization models in which you're billing directly for access to APIs in the data, but there's indirect as well. There's just by using APIs to facilitate different projects like mobile apps, internal mobile apps that you're supporting for your users or for consumers, that's another way to monetize APIs as well. And just finally, we are a leader in the Forrester Wave in the right-hand corner if you're going through any type of RFI or RFP process. And then the very last slide I wanted to hit on is that for any of you that are attending CA World, this is in November 9th through 2012, it's a great user conference. There's a lot of API management content for you to get familiar with. We have 3 demo stations that will be focused on API management. We have a lot of customers there that will be talking about their use cases, Army, Smuckers, advisory board. We have some internal use cases as well, and so it's a great opportunity to meet other customers and understand some other use cases and innovation use cases as well. So with that, we have a few more minutes, and so I wanted to open this up to questions. So let's see where we're at here with questions. All right, here's the first question, and it's to you, David. So can you give us some advice on how to approach evaluating ROI? The way that we do it today does not work.
Yeah, so this is, I actually think this is a little bit challenging because it's easy to do in retrospect, like I pointed out with the Amazon thing. Let's say, for example, you could develop a mobile app for $50,000 and an API for $50,000. At the end of the API, you don't have anything really to show, but the opportunity to create apps now much cheaper. So maybe, and again, I'm making this up, but for $100,000, you can have an API in 5 apps or 2 apps. So that's one way to look at it, very grossly. The other way, there are 2 other ways to look at it. One is the ability to get non-traditional people writing code. For example, The business comes to you, and you go back to them and say, this is how long it's going to take, this is what it's going to do, and then there's an associated cost and infrastructure. But if you could say, hey, that sounds great, we have an API that gives access to everything that you need, or maybe it's not everything you need, but we expect it would take these changes. Now you can go get any developer that you want to write the app, and you could do it on your own time frame, because as long as you're using this API with this security policy and this whatever underneath it, we know that you'll meet our compliance requirements. And so, you know, you can choose to invest in it or not depending on your own ROI. So you're actually putting the ROI back on the business. The final thing that I'll point out, and I was talking with our CTO, John Michelson, a week or so ago, and John's put an interesting post up on blogs.ca.com. It's no longer top, but you could search for John. We recently released some research done by Vance and Bourne, and I think it was a survey submitted to about 1,500 non-tech companies. And one of the interesting things that came out of that is that leaders in the app economy tend to experiment a little bit more. And instead of doing a lot of planning, they actually just get right to work. And you know, they could take 5 days and figure out how they might approach something, or 2 days of coding and have a prototype. And that kind of attitude is really interesting. And I think I learned a lot from that research as a result. And I think if you could figure out how to take that approach within the bounds of the way that your organization does things and approves projects and allocates funding, that would be a really interesting thing to do. So
hey, you know what? You brought up that survey, David. I thought there was another question, there's another response I thought, and statistic I thought that was pretty interesting. One of the questions was, and this was given to not just security professionals, but all executives throughout organizations, and they asked what were the top priorities, top security priorities within your organization. And so number one, obviously, it's reduce the risk of threats, right? So that's what they want to focus on. But I thought, especially since it was a security question, the number two answer that came up in terms of top priorities was providing a better experience to my consumers, right? So as you start to think about that, you know, that's driving change in security, right? So as you have other constituents within the organization that think that the security priority should be enabling a better experience. And so I thought that was just an interesting takeaway.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, another one of our executives used this phrase, the continuum between user experience and security is kind of changing. Nobody wants to give up on security, but it used to be that security would trump all concerns and shut everything down. And now companies are trying to figure out how to not be that black and white about it. How do they get the security they need, but be amenable and flexible when it comes to the user experience? And again, one of the, I think that's so powerful about the API security model is that you can embed the security in the infrastructure, take it out of the hands of the developers and put it in the hands of the people who understand the security implications, and let the developers worry about the user experience and improve the security at the same time. That's what's really powerful.
Yep, great. Hey, Dave, we're at the top of the hour here. I think we're over, so just would like to wrap some things up here. So first off, I want to thank you for joining. I thought the content was excellent. Hopefully everybody that joined the call today got something out of it. What we're going to do is we're going to send out the presentation tomorrow, so everyone should have the content. There's going to be some additional assets as well that's related to this topic. So, and also you have our contact information on there. So if you have any other additional questions for David or myself, please reach out directly. We'll be happy to have a dialogue. So again, thanks everybody for joining. David, thanks for joining. Have a great day.
Thanks everybody.